Between 2006 and 2007, it seemed like half the songs on the radio had the same signature sound. It didn't matter if it was pop, hip-hop, R&B, or even rock. They always had that same futuristic beat style, those weird synths, those pauses in the beats that nobody really understood but everyone copied. And behind all of that, there was a single name. What is this? The producer from Virginia, who started his career as a neighborhood DJ, got shot at when he was 14 years old, and a few years later, he went on to control the sound of global music. The problem is that when a single guy dominates the music industry for so long, eventually the audience starts to get tired. And in this video, you'll understand how Timbaland ended up dominating the sound of an entire decade, and how all that success also ended up being this guy's downfall. You asked, and the video about the man is here. What's up, guys? This is Gerson Saldanha. If you haven't subscribed yet, now's the time. Subscribe, leave a like, turn on notifications, and check out the t-shirt store. The link will be in the description, along with some products related to Timbaland or not that will show up throughout this video. Man, when you buy something, you're really supporting the channel here. So let's get into Timbaland's story because it's long and there are a lot of interesting facts here. Timothy Zachary Mosley was born on March 10, 1972 in Norfolk, Virginia. So, the guy who's celebrating his birthday this week is 54 years old. Timothy has always enjoyed music and started his career as a DJ under the name DJ Timmy Tim or DJ Tim. During his youth, he became well known for forming a duo with rapper Magoo and at the same time being part of the collective SBI or Surrounded by Idiots, which also included the young Pharrell Williams. And let me address the elephant in the room right away. A lot of people say that Timbaland and Pharrell are cousins, but actually they are not cousins. Pharrell himself has talked about this a few times. What happened is that they were from the same neighborhood. Basically, they went to the same school and the same church. And as a joke, Timbaland always called Pharrell his cousin. But both of them were also childhood friends with two other guys who are pretty well known today, right? Which are Pusha T and Malice, who are part of the duo Clips, but they also have their own solo careers and they're already big names in their own right. In 1986, when Timbaland was only 14 years old, he ended up getting shot by a co-worker at the restaurant where he worked accidentally, right? And that ended up making him stop his DJ activities for about 9 months. He practiced a lot with his left hand, which wasn't the hand he usually used to work. And he was also refining and improving his sounds. During this time, he and Magoo kept performing around their area. Until another friend, one from their childhood named Melissa, who we know today as Missy Elliott, saw the talent in her two friends and called them over and said, "Look, I think it would be cool to work with you guys, huh? It's really cool to grow up in a neighborhood like that, huh? Full of talent." At that time, around 1992, Missy Elliott and her group, which she was a part of, right? Called the Isley Ice Sisters, were auditioning to join Devante Swing's record label from the group Jodeci. The same Devante we mentioned in the Florida video. If you missed last week's video, click the card link to stay updated. When the Isleys passed that audition to join Devante's label, they traveled to New York and ended up bringing DJ Tim and Magoo along with them so they could perform together and also do some networking there. But in that same context, Devante was also looking for and creating a group of producers to be part of the Bassman crew. He saw DJ Tim and Magoo there and liked the guys. Okay, there was one thing he didn't like very much, which was that name DJ Tim. And he went and renamed Timothy to Timbaland in honor of the Timbaland boots, which are very common among hip-hop people. Nowadays, the hype is back again. Actually, I think it never really went away, right? But in the 90s, man, they were all the rage for a lot of people who were into the scene. So Timbaland started producing a lot of songs for Jodeci and also for the Ice Sisters. But since R&B was booming in the 90s, in the mid-90s, he got two R&B gigs that, man, were game changers for him at that time. One of them was the album 1 in a Million by Aaliyah, and the other was Genuine's debut, Genuine The Bachelor. And that's it, man. Just the fact that he worked with these two R&B legends already put Timbaland's name like on the A-list of R&B producers. In fact, Timbaland is the name behind the song If Your Girl Only Knew by Aaliyah. and Pony by Dino Genuine. Besides, in '97, he also produced Super Duper Fly, Missy Elliott's debut album. Because Timbaland brought a strong rap foundation into his R&B production, man, that was a huge novelty. Is it common today? Yeah, it's common. But back then in the '90s, it wasn't common. So a lot of other artists started reaching out to Timbaland to work with them, you know, and bring a bit of that futuristic sound to their own work. And he kept releasing more and more hits between 1998 and 2001. Let me mention to you one of my favorite R&B songs from the 90s, which is Get on the Bus by Destiny's Child for the movie Why Do Fools Fall in Love? Besides another classic soundtrack, which is Try Again by Aaliyah for the movie Romeo Must Die. And of course, Missy Elliott's Get Your Freak On, which needs no introduction on this channel. But while Timbaland was making a lot of hits for other artists, he also had to pay some attention to his own career, right? So he had some other collaborative works with Magu, but what we can highlight here are the albums they made together, right? Like, for example, Indecent Proposal, which even had hits from Aaliyah and several other big artists, and the media man trashed it. They didn't like his album. In other words, everything he did for others was really good, you know, but when it came to his own stuff, people were always on his case. But speaking of Aaliyah, as we know, months before this album by Timbaland and Magu came out, unfortunately she passed away in a plane crash after filming a music video in the Bahamas. And since Leah was one of Timbaland's biggest allies, right, working together on some of his most inspiring songs, for him to make all those historic beats he did back then, man, this really shook the producer. He even said that Leah's death took away the joy he felt in making music. And after her death, part of Timbaland's sound identity had to be rebuilt because many things reminded him of the singer. And with that, he started working a bit more with other artists. One of them was a pop singer named Justin Timberlake, who was part of a group called NSYNC. And by far was the highlight of that boy band, you know? And Justin Timberlake, he was in a vibe where he was going to launch his solo work and he wanted to do something really different on this album since NSYNC had ended, right? The band broke up in 2002 and he wanted to do something what? Futuristic. Very 2000s, the face of everything that was the face of that time. Even though Chad Hugo and Pharrell Williams, who formed the duo The Neptunes, were producing most of that album, Scott Storch, who knew Timbaland, gave Timberlake the idea to call him to bring that unique and futuristic vibe to his album. That was the start of Justin Timberlake and Timbaland's friendship. Timbaland produced 2 songs for Timberlake, and one of them became one of Justin's biggest hits called Cry Me a River. The track helped boost Justin Timberlake's album Justified, largely because of the gossip that came along with it. That's because, at that time, Justin Timberlake had just broken up with Britney Spears, and people say that this song had lines, you know, that were indirect messages to his ex-girlfriend. But this thing about bringing gossip into music is something that both Justin Timberlake and Timbaland will do a bit later in this video, and soon you'll know what I'm talking about. But those who ended up discovering Justin Timberlake's work more because of the musicality were surprised by Timbaland's talent, since he could also make songs that had a bit of pop and also R&B mixed in. But with this success, Timbaland was already on his way to becoming a legend in music production, man. So he goes back to producing several other tracks for Missy Elliott, and at that time, man, she was just dropping bangers, like for example, Work It. Gossip Folks, which also featured Ludacris, and Lose Control, which also had Kiara and Fat Man Scoop. This song here was another one that broke through in an incredible way. It's one of Missy Elliott's most memorable songs. It has a legendary music video that I think even won a Grammy. It reached number 3 on the Hot 100 and established Missy Elliott as one of the biggest names in female rap worldwide to this day. Man, a quick honorable mention here to this Timbaland era from 2002 to 2005, right? That's because he also worked with Jay-Z during that time. On the track Dirt Off Your Shoulder from the Black Album released in 2005. This song was the one Barack Obama mentioned once, if I'm not mistaken, when he was re-elected as President of the United States. He said something about brushing the dust off his shoulders. And every major news outlet reported Barack Obama said he'd brush the dust off his shoulders without even understanding his reference. Only people from the scene, only those who really love hard-hitting tracks, caught that reference. Anyway, this shows Timbaland's power goes beyond music, you know? Even in politics, the guy had influence. Was it kind of directly through Jay-Z? Yes, but still, he had it, right? Also in 2005, a certain singer from Canada started getting closer to Timbaland with the intention of changing her sound a bit. Her name, Nelly Furtado. After the huge success of the album Whoa, Nelly, which came out back in 2000 and had classics like the song I'm Like a Bird, I Love to Fly Away. On the woman's second album called Folklore, which came out in 2003 and was a big flop, especially in the United States, Nelly Furtado insisted that she wanted to do something more different, more urban, more street, and more in line with what was actually playing all over the world at that time. And all of this fit perfectly with what Timbaland was producing at that time, so there was no one better for her to work with. The plan was to create a totally new album, more pop, more danceable, and more influenced by hip-hop. That's when they went into the studio, and in April 2006, they dropped the hit, Promiscuous. I don't even need to go on much to say how hyped Promiscuous was. It was #1 on the Hot 100 in the US and in Brazil, or at least at my house. Actually, it wasn't even #1 here. It was more like number 1,000 since I played it nonstop back then and after. Anyway, this song, besides having a legendary music video, also brought a lot of Easter eggs, kind of spoilers too. With the participation of Justin Timberlake and Carrie Hilson, Promiscuous saved Nelly Furtado's career. And with that, it also made Timbaland go into another genre, which was that more feminine pop, you know? It's a territory he had already explored with Missy Elliott, but more in rap, you know? At that same time, Timbaland was expanding his brand with the Mosley Music Group label, which was connected to Interscope Records. He wanted to build a kind of family, but it wasn't connected by blood, it was connected by sound. Nelly Furtado ended up being one of the first people associated with this new Timbaland project, which later had Carrie Hilson joining and the rapper DOA. In June of that same 2006, they released the album Loose, which had Timbaland as the main music producer, as well as Danja, who was kind of Timbaland's protege, right? And he also helped Timbaland with a lot of the beats. The next single was the song Man Eater, which had relative success, but it's a single that's 100% Timbaland's signature, and then they... But nothing would come close to the third single from that era, which was the song Say It Right, released in October 2006. That one, my man, was a game changer. You could get a copyright claim on this song even if I list it second, but you all know which one I mean. But what matters to us here is another #1 for Nelly Furtado, another #1 for Timbaland, and with all this, there were a lot of people wanting to work with Timbaland. I don't even know how he was handling that. At the same time that Timbaland was finishing Loose, Justin Timberlake came back to him and said, "Man, look, I want to make my second studio album and I want you to be the sole producer of this album. So come here, help me out, man, for God's sake." Timbaland jumped on this project and the two of them made history. Just a month after the release of Nelly Furtado's album, the first single from Justin Timberlake's new project came out, which was the song Sexy Back. Sexy Back was also #1 on the Hot 100, and it was Justin Timberlake's first, and it stayed there for 7 fucking weeks until they released the legendary Future Sex Love Sounds, Justin Timberlake's second album, which came with other hits. The next single, which is the song My Love, it also reached #1 on the Billboard Hot 100 Played Everywhere with that black and white music video of his, of Justin Timberlake with Timbaland. Wait, focus there. But it didn't play more than the next single, which was the song What Goes Around, Goes Around, Goes Around, Goes Around, Comes Around. That cinematic music video which featured Scarlett Johansson, and man, every time it played on TVZ, Mix TV, MTV, Vietman, whatever it was, they made a point of showing the almost 10-minute long video, which felt almost like a short film, you know? I watched in front of the TV knowing all the lines by heart, even without understanding any English. What Goes Around Comes Around was Justin Timberlake's third consecutive #1 on the US singles chart, turning the guy into a true legend. And I also think that era put Timbaland into the mainstream. He had grown beyond R&B, hip-hop, and even pop. Everybody knew who Timbaland was, and everyone recognized this producer's signature sound. But Timbaland wasn't just cranking out hits for Nelly Furtado and Justin Timberlake. And at the same time he was producing those two super hyped albums back then, he was also producing songs for other artists, which today are legendary tracks. Get your heart ready for the nostalgia that's about to hit. Here we go, diving in, Ayo Technology by 50 Cent with Justin Timberlake and Timbaland.
Yeah, you got me saying,
The remix of Gimme a Gimmabari by Beyonce that came out on the B-Day album. Wait a minute, that's B-Day. The remix? Wait a minute, das Pussycat Dolls, que inclusive foram on the B album. Ashley Simpson's Mare Cure, which was something extremely pop, girl pop, you know, white girl pop. Besides helping and also working on some comeback albums of music legends, like for example the comeback album of Björk, Bone Thugs and Harmony, and the 80s legends Duran Duran. In other words, at that time Timbaland dominated female pop, male R&B, hip-hop, alternative music, and 80s rock. And he was still gaining strength in electronic pop that was just starting to emerge, and that helped build the myth we had back then that Timbaland was everywhere. Actually everywhere at the same time in every genre. But just like I mentioned to you at the beginning of this video, he worked for others, but he never forgot about his own work. And at that same time, he was also producing his next studio album, actually Timbaland's second solo studio album. During 2006 and 2007, Timbaland was using a mix of new beats and old demos that he had already made. That's why it always seemed like he was producing hits at an insane speed. Actually, this thing about recycling beats was his signature. It was his thing. And he himself talked about it all the time. But man, even so, it's tough. And in early 2007, this work by Timbaland hit the stores, and its name, Shock Value. And man, this album was made to shock. But to talk about shock value, I'm going to have to do something different. I'm going to separate the singles from this era into 4 chapters. Let's go. The first single delivered some major gossip. The second single, nobody paid attention to it at first, but later it became a huge hit. The third single, Timbaland reworked a song by an alternative rock B, and it also became a big hit. And the fourth and last single, Timbaland kind of helped try to save a singer's solo career. Well, chapter number 1, the jabs on the first single, the song Give It To Me. This song was by Timbaland with his 2 protégés, the hitmakers Nelly Furtado and Justin Timberlake. But when this single came out, it caused a lot of buzz because the 3 artists were throwing shade like blatantly at people in the industry. Well, Justin Timberlake in Give It To Me was throwing shade at none other than the legend Prince. Yes, the singer Prince. That's because in an interview that happened at some Hollywood party, Prince supposedly said that Sexy never left, which was a clear reference to Justin Timberlake's hit Sexy Back. And then Justin Timberlake responds in this track in a kind of ironic way, right? Like, if Sexy never left, why does everyone keep bothering me about it to this day? There's another part where he also says like, I looked at the charts, right? I looked at the charts and didn't see your name there. And what fuels this theory even more that this song was for Prince is that Justin Timberlake hints that the jab is aimed at someone who had been in the industry for many years. Well, Justin Timberlake never confirmed it, but he also never denied it, right? That this beef, mini beef, happened between him and the legendary Prince. Something different has already happened with Timberlake. In Timbo's lyrics, he drops a line that goes like this. Yeah, I'm the acclaimed music producer and you're just the piano man. You're just the pianist. At the time, everyone immediately realized he was talking about Scott Storch. Yes, the guy who introduced Justin Timberlake to him. What was happening was that Timberlake thought Scott Storch was stealing some of the ideas that Timberlake had at that time. Besides, there were fights between the two of them over the songwriting credits for the song Crime in a River. This beef here is more than confirmed. Everyone knows that Timberlake sent this to Scott Storch. I think even Timberlake himself has mentioned this at some point. The other one about Nelly Furtado has some theory behind it, but also a lot of truth. Nelly Furtado was aiming her Disney Give It To Me at none other than Fergie. Let's go. When Nelly released the song Promiscuous and it was such a hit, Fergie used it as, I think, the second single of her The Duchess era, right? From her solo album outside of Black Eyed Peas, the song Fergalicious. Look, Fergalicious and Promiscuous are basically two songs with the same name. And then, the most memorable line from the song Fergalicious is when Fergie says, "Yeah, I'm kind of Fergalicious, but I'm not promiscuous," which was a very clear jab at Nelly Furtado herself.
Fergalicious, but I ain't promiscuous.
And then Nelly Furtado says in the song Give It To Me something like, "Girl, calm down because you really like my abs and promiscuous just like my butt." Well, Nelly Furtado actually said in interviews at the time that those lines were aimed at a pop singer. So there's no other explanation, man. So did you guys know about this story? Did you think Give It To Me was just a song? If yes, if not, comment below because I want to know. Chapter number 2, the underrated song is called The Way I Are. Well, The Way I Are was part of what I mentioned before, right? All those singles, right? And the project that Timbaland had back in 2003, 2004, which is the year this song was actually made, right? And he used it to compose Choka and Valor. But the audience isn't stupid and they ended up noticing this thing. In the album version, the song The Way I Are really sounds like it's unfinished, you know? It feels like something's missing, you know? That made many people turn up their noses, especially Timbaland's fans. He could have done better. This song feels like it's in an endless loop and never ends. But that feeling that something was missing in the song was something that, when Choque Valor came out, everyone kept talking about. Even though Timbaland, when he released the music video for this song, tried to extend the track with other features besides him and Carrie Hilson who are on the song, right? He even added DOE and his own brother Sebastian to rap on it. But that didn't convince the audience either. However, the Brazilian audience immediately liked it because of the soccer scenes. And for us, it was kind of unusual to see Americans referencing soccer. That's because that music video was filmed in an alley in England, so it didn't make sense. I don't know what happened out there. I'll owe you guys this one, fellas. But The Way I Are, out of nowhere, started climbing the charts and reached number 3, an incredible number 3 on the Hot 100. Maybe it was because of the lyrics, which are kind of anti-flashy. It tells the story of a man flirting with a woman. It kind of reminds you a little of the structure of Promiscuous, right? But it's about a man talking to a woman. Here's the thing. If you want to be with me, you have to accept me as I am. The grammatical error in this song was widely discussed and still confuses people. Let me share a quick personal story. Back then, I used to ask a lot of my English teachers why the name of this song was The Way I Are and not The Way I Am or The Way You Are. Why was it The Way I Are? I remember on an English test with fill in the blanks, I wrote IR and argued with the teacher thinking it was correct because I'd seen it in a song. But years later, I came to understand why it was IR. It's really because the track wanted to show a more colloquial side, something more common, more urban, you know, the way people actually talk. And it could also have been a matter of rhyme, right? Because if you try to put in the part that Timbaland says, like, put the way I am or the way you are, it kind of doesn't fit right, you know? But anyway, I believe that The Way I Are is probably Timbaland's biggest hit nowadays, right? The song people revisit the most and one of the ones people feel the most nostalgia for. Something like that. Chapter 3. The day Timbaland turned Apologize into a classic hit. Apologize is a classic example of how Timbaland could put his signature on a song and completely transform it. And it all starts with a rock band called One Republic led by Ryan Tedder. Back in 2005, they released Apologize as the first single from the band's first album. And it didn't get any exposure. Nobody cared when Apologize came out. Only Timbaland saw something special in this track. Around 2006, Timbaland really saw something different in it, and he realized that if he added some more experimental and futuristic elements, maybe it could work really well. Then he decided to completely remix the song Apologize, and it became what we know today. After the remix, Apologize became a huge global hit, really big. It reached number 2 on the Billboard Hot 100, and it was one of the most played songs on American radio in 2007. And I remember not just American radio, man, Brazilian radio too. I remember this song playing constantly because I lived it. Many people consider that the signature song of shock value back then. It was the album's most played song, and let's admit Timbaland's move kickstarted Ryan Tedder's career, right? Because from then on, One Republic took off. They released their album, right? Dreaming Out Loud, a classic that has the song Stop and Stare, which I really love. Yes, guys, I really like rock a lot. And anyway, If it weren't for Ryan Tedder, we wouldn't have other music classics like, for example, Halo by Beyonce. He's the composer, Ryan Tedder. And Counting Stars, which is one of the most viewed songs here on YouTube and one of the most streamed on Spotify. Anyway, well, and the fourth and last chapter of Shock Value, which was the song that tried to help launch a solo career for a pop star. Around 2007, more or less, Nicole Scherzinger was already well established as one of the vocalists, well, not one, right? As the lead vocalist, right? Of the girl group Pussycat Dolls. But the record label saw that she had a little more potential, so they tried to invest in a solo career for her. At the same time, she was working with some producers, and especially with Timbaland, on her so-called debut album called Her Name is Nicole. And this album, it had some test singles, which, man, I'll tell you, they didn't do very well. For example, Whatever You Like, which even had T.I. as a feature, and it's actually a really good song, and also Baby Love, with the participation of Will I Am. But both songs didn't have much impact, so they decided to cancel Nicole's album. But she was already listed as a feature, right, on the song Scream, which was the fourth single from Shock Value, and it also featured Carrie Hilson. In other words, this song was kind of meant to introduce Carrie Hilson even more. Timbaland was already putting her on every song, and also Nicole, so two singers there who were about to go solo, right? But in Nicole's case, it didn't really work out. She even went back to the Pussycat Dolls later, and she was actually more successful there. But Scream tried, Timbaland tried. But they couldn't get her solo career to take off at that time. Even after all the success and dominance of Shock Value in 2007, Timbaland wanted to repeat that, right? The success with the follow-up to that album. But some problems started to happen. Shock Value 2. It ended up surrounded by delays, leaks, and some controversies, and that really affected the impact of this album. Timbaland started announcing several artists who would be featured on that album. That really hyped a lot of people up, right? The excitement was really high, but unfortunately many tracks leaked, and people saw that none of those artists they were talking about were actually there. And the label was also pressuring Timbaland to redo a lot of tracks as well, which obviously was a pretty stressful process for the guy. And then the album that was supposed to come out in 2008 at the beginning of 2008 got so delayed that it ended up being released at the end of 2009. So basically, Timbaland's hype at that time was already fading. Even so, some tracks still managed to stand out. For example, Carry Out, which reached number 11 on the Hot 100. And at that time, a lot of people could already notice that some things were starting to change. The timing was a problem for Timbaland, man, because he delayed all of that. And then other big hits came along, right? And it also seemed like the market and the audience were already kind of fed up with the kind of sound Timbaland was producing. And that's how it is, right, guys? Since Timbaland had a lot of hits, there was a lot of controversy too. And we get to that part, with big hits come big responsibilities. And with Timbaland, it was no different. The truth is that the market was saturated with the style of beats that Timbaland was making. It seemed like every song he created, from pop to R&B to hip-hop to rock, had the same sonic DNA. Besides, in 2008 and 2009, the type of music was already starting to change. Artists started betting on heavier EDM, on more European-style synths, right? Some beats too coming from the old continent, productions inspired by club music and electronic music as well. And in this context, names like Dr. Luke, Max Martin, David Guetta were the guys that artists wanted to work with all the time. And there's another factor here that's interesting. Timbaland himself started to slow down his music production process a bit. A lot of it was also because Shock Value 2 flopped or didn't do as well commercially as he expected. And another factor is that it wasn't because he wanted to. After a dental surgery around 2007, Timbaland ended up developing a dependence on opioid painkillers. The medication involved was Oxycontin, which caused a lot of problems in his life. This medicine is used for intense pain, and at the time it was already known to cause a certain dependence. According to what Timbaland himself said in later interviews, he ended up taking high doses daily, had trouble working without the medication, and other things. This led to a depressive episode for him. It got much more intense around the time of the Shock Value 2. At that point, he felt like he was no good for anything. Nobody cared about him. Nobody cared about his music. And just as important, the music industry was moving on without him. In later interviews, Timbaland claimed he had thoughts of ending his own life. If you get what I've been trying to say this whole time, according to him, the mix of industry pressure, the drop in popularity, and dependence on medication put him through the hardest time of his life. But fortunately, Timbaland managed to recover from that. He decided to stop taking medication, focus on his physical health, and completely change his lifestyle. He started training intensely, losing weight, and rebuilding his career little by little. And then, in that process, Timbaland created an online music production course. He became a mentor to several artists. He really revived his career. And there are also people who are into nostalgia, right? Which gave an extra boost to the songs he produced all the way back from the early 90s. There was even a recent controversy about him where he used AI in music production and people started talking, saying this and that. But that's how it is, right? Timbaland has always been a futurist, ahead of his time. So him using AI for good is, I think, welcome in the music industry. But alright, so Gerson, how is Timbaland doing in 2026? Timbaland's career is moving forward on three main fronts. As a mentor, as a more selective producer, and as a music entrepreneur. In other words, the guy has experience, the guy has a legacy. And to wrap up this whole story, when the whole world got tired of Timbaland's sound, saying it was boring and repetitive, it was already too late. That's because he had already changed the music industry and it was forever. But that's just what I think. I want to know what you guys think about this Timbaland video and the whole legacy of this guy who made the songs that shaped our minds in our childhood and teenage years. Anyway guys, leave all your comments below because Gerson Saldanha. And that's it, big hug from Gerson. See you in our next video and thanks